I am Nicole Forsgren. I will be talking about DevOps and kind of what we're seeing coming up next. So someone asked me to kind of give, what this means coming out of Lean. So I'm not going to give an overview of DevOps and Lean, but why should we care? So basically a couple, what some subtitles could be is what this means for our bottom line. Or another alternate title is ITIL can suck it. That was a great one from this morning. So here we go, and hopefully this is not Ignite style. Let's see what happens. So for years we've all been investing in IT, thinking it's going to affect the bottom line. By the way, it doesn't, like ever. So for 40 or 50 years, all these investments in IT have never impacted the bottom line, like ever. We've had this adorable pipe dream that it's going to, and it just doesn't. And years of decades of research, it hasn't affected the bottom line. If it has, it maybe did, but after years. So for the first time, we're starting to see these hit the bottom line, but only if we can combine it with this full transformation, this full re-engineering shift that is accompanied with a cultural transformation, a re-engineering transformation, a practice and process transformation that now we're calling DevOps, or a lot of people are calling DevOps. It has to be end-to-end. It has to include everything. That's the only way it's starting to hit. But now the data's showing it. It's showing it over and over, and it's really, really exciting. And this is what the Lean transformation is promising to IT. And why is this the case? It's because any other company, so any company could go buy a server, throw it in the closet, give it really pretty uplighting. But any other company could buy the same server or a competitor server and throw it in a similar closet, or any other company could do something similarly difficult. You could buy an ERP system, you could develop a really difficult product, but it wasn't going to contribute to the bottom line. And why was this? It's because it wasn't going to get you an advantage, or at least not a competitive advantage. And if it was a competitive advantage, it was not going to be what we call a sustainable competitive advantage. It was going to be a point of parity. It would help you keep up. It would never be a point of distinction. It wasn't going to help you get ahead. DevOps has changed that. It looks very, very much like the Lean and Toyota transformation that we saw in manufacturing. A lot like Dan pointed out. We move the people to the work. The work needs to become smaller. We need to be able to make these changes quickly, fast, move it into production, see that business impact so that we can make changes quickly. This is what we mean when we say that it has this massive re-engineering shift. This is why we can finally see these changes to maximize the efficiency, to cut costs, to make this impact on the bottom line. So, DevOps is good for IT performance, and this IT performance translates, finally, into organizational outcomes. And this is huge. So for years, IT has been seen as a cost center. And by the way, that's not like a bad thing, but it hasn't really been a competitive advantage. And now it finally is. These are our glory days, y'all. By the way, holler for the people with an American accent. And I dropped a y'all. Okay. So that was then. So this all started in the late, aughts. John Osborne, Paul Hammond, DevOps cooperation at Flickr. So they talked about doing 10 deploys per day. And people in the audience at Velocity kind of lost their minds. Some people thought this was revolutionary and amazing. Other people thought this was like the most horrid thing you could possibly do to your ops team. And so people who were in the audience, just remember it. People who weren't in the audience, like ripples went out. Some people thought they were full of it and there's no way it was real. And then, you know, some people are familiar with these stats, that I think which come out of 2013. These are Amazon stats. These are production and host environments only, okay? Just over 1,000 max deploys in a single hour. This is a deploy every 11.5 seconds, approximately. 10,000 hosts receiving deploys on average. Maximum number of hosts receiving deploys is 30,000. Okay, now check this out. Now keep in mind, these are companies that have, like, they're doing the DevOps, they have seen the way, the truth, and the life. They have undergone the entire DevOps transformation. Now this is Etsy. Mike Britton gave a talk called Continuous Deployment, the Dirty Details in 2013. He reported Etsy code deployment. What's required 6 to 14 hours, and what they called their deployment army now took 15 minutes in one person. He was reporting 30 deploys per day. 50 deploys per day, March 2014. He reported QCon here in London. Between March 2014 and April 2014, at Chef Conf, Etsy was then reporting 80 to 90 deploys per day. So, the researchers who worked on the State of DevOps report for 2015, when these numbers were all put together, they wondered, is there a way to break the mythical man month? If you have completely undergone the DevOps transformation, what happens? So an analysis was run. Deploys per day per developer. If you have completely undergone the DevOps transformation, so this analysis only looked at companies or organizations and teams that have completely undergone the DevOps transformation. They're doing at least, I believe, daily deploys. Look what happens. So low performers, medium performers, high performers. If you look at high performers, as they decrease the number of developers, this looks a lot like Etsy's deployment. Once you have your DevOps framework and infrastructure and practices in place, you can increase the number of developers and increase the number of delivery and deployments that you have in place. Research suggests that the transformation is worth it. You'll have some growing pains, but guess what? You can see these increases. If you're first starting this journey, this is going to be painful. If you're halfway along this journey, you're not really going to see it. But once you're along the way, things will be good. Okay, so we know that DevOps is good for IT. So I was lead investigator on the 2014 State of DevOps report. There's lots of peer review happening with that data right now. So we looked at measuring DevOps and IT performance, the way we proxied IT performance here. We looked at deploy frequency. Again, this wasn't delivery, right? We want to be able to deliver push code whenever it makes sense for the business. So we looked at deploy frequency, mean time to recover, and lead time for changes. So high-performing DevOps teams have more throughput. So by the way, this is where ITIL can suck it. ITIL suggests that you should always balance throughput and stability. The way that you balance throughput and stability is you sacrifice throughput in order to get stability. The analysis that I'm working on peer review right now, I've controlled for the data several different ways, shows that throughput and stability move in tandem, consistently, all of the time. Low IT performers, their throughput and stability move together. If you're not doing them well, they will both be low. Medium performers, they are always medium and they always move together. High performers, Throughput and stability always move together, and they move at the highest levels. All of these things are statistically significant, and they always move together. There is no such thing as a trade-off. As soon as you move one down, the other moves down with it. That's what I mean when I say, like, the trade-offs just don't work, okay? So, the highest performing DevOps teams, when I compare my high performers and my low performers, we get more throughput. High compared to low, we see 30 times more frequent deployments in both year 2015 and 2014, and 200 times faster lead times than their peers, 2015 and 2014, both years. Now, we also see more stability. Again, these move in tandem. Interesting thing, 2015 versus 2014. 2015, we see 60 times more change success rate, and faster MTTR 168 times. It's looking like companies are maximizing stability just a little bit, mostly because once they get their throughput optimized, they don't necessarily need to deploy every 5 seconds when they can already deploy every hour. They can, they just don't have to. They're making those decisions based on business needs and business cases. Okay? DevOps promises and delivers more throughput and more stability in tandem without the trade-offs that ITIL calls for. So, what does this mean for us? More throughput. These are our stats again. So, we can think about what this means for us in business. These are the things that Lean promises for us in this new world of technology, software delivery. New content delivery. What does it mean for us in new content delivery? What about value and savings around A/B testing? What about value around speed to market? Or compliance and regulatory changes, or security? What happens when there's a new SSL vulnerability? How quickly can we get that out? So Adrian mentioned this. There was a paper put out by Kohavi et al. Talked about online experimentation at Microsoft. Evaluating well-designed and executed experiments that were designed to improve a key metric, only about 1/3 were successful at improving the key metric. So if we know which 1/3 those are, we can keep those in place. If we know which 2/3 those are not, we can pull those out. Let's say we want to be lazy and only include those 1/3. What can we do with the other 2/3 of our time? Vacation, go have a beer. We can do all sorts of things. We can optimize on those 1/3, but if we don't know what those 1/3 are, what sort of position are we in? Okay, now let's look at stability. We also have more stability. What does this mean for us again around value and savings around reliability? Value and savings around uptime. Also, compliance, security, and reputation around compliance and security. We all know the Netflix case? Or I'm sure several of us do. When Amazon went down, and everyone went down, except Netflix, because they had been using Chaos Monkey. You don't choose Chaos Monkey chooses you. What can we all do when we have more resilient systems? You know, everyone else thought that Netflix was being treated special. No, they were treating themselves special because they were used to failure. They had more stable, resilient systems. Now, there are also key factors that correlate with each of these. MTTR, lead time for changes, deployment for frequency. Version control for all production artifacts happens to correlate with all of them. So having your code, and by the way, that's for all production artifacts. So that's application code, source control, configuration management, infrastructure, having everything in a repository. And that's in part so you can spin everything up, recreate as you need, providing infrastructure and test environments, providing environments for dev, test, QA, everyone for all of your cross-functional teams, so they can spin it up whenever they want, so it's cheap and easy and fast. Monitoring, automated testing, continuous delivery. Also super important, culture, job satisfaction, climate for learning. Lest we forget, this is not just about automation and tooling and practice and process. We really need to have that culture and that climate in place that allows us to do experimentation. So DevOps is good for organizations. Let's also cut to the bottom line, right? High-performing IT organizations, when compared to those low-performing IT organizations, twice as likely to exceed profitability, market share, and productivity goals. This is worldwide. This is across all types of organizations, industries. Now, the number on the right, this was for respondents who volunteered their stock ticker. So this is limited to companies who are traded on US stock exchange. But for those that did, 50% higher market cap growth over 3 years. So by the way, this is also not like startups and unicorns and only web app shops. So when we go in and look at the data, this is primarily, not primarily, majority, because it's stock market companies, financial institutions, retail organizations, of course, large tech organizations, but clearly not just startups and web app shops, because they're publicly traded. So, also when we look at main contributors to organizational performance, IT performance and strong DevOps practices was a huge contributor. Organizational culture and climate for learning. Job sat was the #1 predictor, but when we go back and look at the literature, that's held for decades. When we take a look at organizational culture, so this is sort of interesting. How many here? So we can take a look. Let's review quickly. Pathological or power-oriented cultures tend to be characterized by low cooperation. Messengers are shot. Responsibilities are shirked. Bridging is discouraged. Failure leads to scapegoating, and novelty is crushed. Bureaucratic or rule-oriented cultures. There is modest cooperation. Messengers are neglected. Narrow responsibilities, bridging tolerated. Failure leads to justice. Novelty can lead to problems. Generative or performance-oriented, also called a trust-oriented culture. High cooperation, messengers are trained, risks are shared, bridging is encouraged, failure leads to inquiry, novelty is implemented. Who here has a friend who works in a power-oriented culture? Okay. Who here has a friend who works in a rule-oriented culture? Okay. And who here works in a performance-oriented culture? And who here did not dare answer for their friend? Fantastic. Okay, results from the 2014 study showed that about half of the respondents, and this was based on over 9,000. We were almost at 9,300 respondents, and data on this covers about 20,000 people now. So we've got really, really solid data year over year. About half the people are in rule-oriented, about a third were in performance-oriented, about 15% were in power-oriented. And I will note that when we look at high, medium, and low performers, there is a statistically significant difference with most of the high performers belonging in or seeing representation in those generative cultures. And that really is a significantly strong predictor of strong performance and strong DevOps. And why? Let's take a look at a quote from Scott Cook at Inuit. So the call-outs are mine. But by installing a rampant innovation culture, we performed 165 experiments in the peak 3 months of tax season. So in the States, do you guys do taxes? Do you guys have like tax season here? So we have to fill out our taxes, and taxes are always due a certain time every single year. Our business result, conversion rate of the website is up 50%. Employee result, everyone loves it because their new ideas can make it to market. Okay, go back 5 or 10 years, 15 years. Who would ever dare do experiments on a live website in the peak of tax season? Like, think back to like 90s style programming. There is no way you would dare do that. But when else are you going to figure out when someone would want something except during peak tax season? And also look at the second part. Conversion rate of the website is up, so your customers are liking it better. But what else did he mention? He mentioned the employees are happy. How cool is that? Not only is he making more money, but he's explicitly calling out that his own employees are happier because their ideas are making it to market. And also, what he didn't really mention, their new ideas can make it to market, but also their new ideas can make it to test, and if they don't like it, they can just pull it out. I'm guessing no one's getting screamed at if it didn't work, because you can try it. This is also a great story. Greg Linden at Amazon. So Greg had this great idea where, so I assume we've all been to the supermarket and the store, and they always have, like at checkout, they always have all the candy right there, to which I'm a sucker for. Half the time I get candy, or if you ever have kids, like they always want candy, so I end up buying candy. So Greg had this great idea that at checkout at Amazon, like offer suggestions for what you should buy at checkout. Okay, the problem or the challenge of that is that, like at the supermarket, you're already physically trapped in line, and I'm not gonna walk out. At Amazon, you could click away. So he presented this idea though to a senior vice president. The senior vice president was like, yeah, absolutely not. No, this is a horrible idea, because if I get distracted, I can leave the website. I can navigate away. Cute, adorable, nice idea. Absolutely not. Greg packs up his things, like he showed him a fully functional prototype, drops his head, walks out of the office, goes back to his own office, writes up an A/B test, pushes it into production. Comes back after a few weeks and shows him drastic increases in revenue. So he sort of just expressly went against the wishes of a senior vice president. Like, how many here could do that? That, like, probably more here than could even 5 or 10 years ago, but that's not incredibly common. That's the hallmark of a novelty-encouraged, data-driven culture. And Greg writes this up later in his blog. I think building this culture is the key to innovation. Creativity must flow from everywhere. Whether you're a summer intern or the CTO, any good idea must seek an objective test, preferably a test that exposes the idea to real customers. Everyone must be able to experiment, learn, and iterate. It's also worth noting they had the infrastructure built and available that provided the ability for him to do an A/B test. Not everyone has that available. It was also easy for him to push that through. So, job sat's also a strong predictor of organizational performance. So, by the way, great thing to do. Top correlates of job satisfaction: high trust organizational culture, climate of learning, win-win relationships between people that are traditionally siloed, proactive monitoring and auto-scaling, use of version control, automated testing, things that help you do your job easier. Provide people the resources they need to get their job done. So by the way, out of the 2015 DevOps survey, we know, so by the way, this pretty picture is in the 2015 DevOps survey practice. This is a fully tested predictive statistical model done with partial least squares. We know that comprehensive, fast, reliable test deployment and automation, trunk-based development and continuous integration, application code, and app and system configuration all in version control, those are all CD. These contribute to higher IT performance, lower change fail rates, lower levels of deployment pain. And these all contribute to higher levels of organizational performance. So we know that CD practices are good for organizations. We also know that lean management practices are good for organizations. Effective WIP limits that drive process improvement, visual displays to monitor quality and productivity of that WIP, use of application performance and infrastructure monitoring tools to make business decisions, all contribute to lean management. Those help reinforce that strong generative work culture that help contribute to IT performance and help contribute to that org performance. By the way, lean management also decreases levels of burnout that we see in workers, or at least contribute to perceived levels of burnout, which, quite honestly, is almost as good. If I don't feel burned out, that's a strong first step. So DevOps isn't just IT, it's the practice of IT. It's how we get the job done. It's the tooling and the automation, which is a good first step, but we also need the practice and the process of how we get there. It's also the culture. This is the lean of the software and the technology transformation revolution. So again, we need all of the pieces in order to contribute to that bottom line that we've been talking about. Thank you very much for your time. Please remember to write this up.